feels good to be here with neighbors, with friends, with people I'm just getting to know and people I've known for a long time. I will just start off a story. Moving, the West End. 80% of us are renters. Many of us are condo dwellers. Many of us live in little houses, but we all probably have something in common because we've moved. How many of you have moved once while you've lived in the West End? Just show of hands. Once. How about twice? Okay, how about 3 times? 4 times? 5 times? Oh, there's still another 6 times? Oh, yeah. So maybe this story will be one that you recognize. One of the first buildings I lived in here in the West End was above a McDonald's. It smelled great in the summer. Well, no, it smelled like Big Macs, and maybe that's your sense of perfume, it's not mine. But when I arrived, it was a busy day. Moving days are never very fun. But we had a truckload of stuff, we were moving it in, and sure enough, we arrive and the landlord says, well, you're not supposed to move in until tomorrow. Uh-oh, because people have moved into the other place that we used to live in too, so we've got a truck full of stuff, what are we gonna do? Well, they said, well, maybe we can work out something. And I said, well, here on the contract it says you're moving me in today, so we're gonna find a way to make this work. And we get there, and of course, the elevators are full up because people are moving that day, in and out. And I asked the landlord, I said, so how many are moving in and out traditionally a month? He said 13. 13 different people moved in and moved out every month. And I couldn't believe it. So sure enough, you've got the elevators all booked through the day. And what happens? There's 2 elevators. Well, the elevator breaks down. So you have 1 elevator for 13 people to move in and out in one day with pressing movers saying, get on with it, we gotta move the truck, we gotta go pick up something else and move on. Well, what happened that day, and it's something I think I've seen in all the other stories we've heard tonight, and I see in this neighborhood, which is one of the reasons I love it so much, is that people there said, you know, other neighbors who just happened to see us in our state of fix, and said, well, here, I've got 20 minutes. Why don't we help you out? We will load the stuff up, we will walk up the stairs. Thankfully, we were only on the 8th floor. So, yes, and trust me, I say thankfully, because some of you may know people who live on the 18th floor and they find that their elevator has failed or is out for a certain number of weeks. But what that really meant to me was that there was a spirit of giving, a spirit of sharing in this community, which is still here today, and I see it demonstrated all the time, of neighbors pitching in to help out neighbors. And when I tell people about that kind of spirit here in the West End, to people who don't live here, to people who don't know this neighborhood, they can't believe it. They say, well, I thought the West End was anonymous. I thought if we lived in all these densely packed buildings, I'd never know anybody, because there's just too many people. But I found, in fact, it's really the opposite. That maybe it's because we're all jammed into little shoeboxes stacked on top of each other, that you kind of have to get to know your neighbors in some sense. Because inevitably you're going to get to know more about your neighbors than they might want you to know. In my time as an MLA, there was a story that I thought I would share. I had a fellow come in really complaining about his neighbor. He said, oh God, I can't sleep at night, it's horrible, the guy snores. He's just so loud, I don't know what to do. I said, really? The walls are that thin? Well, apparently in his building the walls were that thin. Because the next day, the guy who snored came into my office and complained about his neighbor who was harassing him for snoring. They couldn't figure out how to make it work, and eventually, after some suggestions of earplugs and some suggestions of some sleep treatments and things like that, the things an MLA has to do, they worked it out. They worked it out. But I just finished, I'll just finish by saying we saw some history here, some photos. Come by tomorrow between 5 and 7 or on the weekend, or next week as well. My office is down on 923 Denman Street. We're going to have an open house, so get some beverages, meet your neighbors. But what we've done is we went through and picked out about 60 images of the West End through history from the Vancouver archives. We put them up on the wall. A volunteer went out, took photos of the places today, so you can see the difference between, say, 1890s, clear cut with a little, what do we have? We had a fish cannery down on English Bay. There was a little mill and not much else compared to today, where you've got the aquatic center, which I think is about where the fish cannery was. And you can see what was Granville Island, which was a mud flat, but is now, of course, Granville Island. So come by tomorrow, come by on Saturday, check that out. And I'll leave this with one last thing. I was given a newspaper from September 1980 of the West Ender, which we now know as WE. And what is on the front page, it's Tenants Picket Nelson Court. And it's a story about evictions, renovictions, rent increases, and housing and moving. What are the other stories? The West End skunk story. And it's all about West Enders who have problems with skunks. Both two complaints that we still hear today. So, well, much has changed in our neighborhood, much has stayed the same, but it's really the people that make this place what a wonderful place it is to live. And so, I encourage you to get your neighbors involved in the West End plan, because if we're going to keep this the great place it is, we all have to be involved. And it's an honor to serve as your MLA. Thank you.